Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. We got some boxing topics to talk about today, obviously. First of all, shout out to everybody in the live chat. Hope you're feeling good. Who we got in here? Big up Jack Thompson early with a super chat. Thoughts on Kinahan getting arrested? When people at that level of the game get arrested, it doesn't necessarily mean that much. People get arrested at that level of the game and then tend to get released. Do you know what I mean? Or tend to, if they do get locked up on pretty minor charges. So that's what I think about that. We'll see whether that happens on this occasion. Time will tell. Big up Jack Thompson. And the reason that they get oftentimes let off on minor charges or released, stuff like that, is because they've got friends in very high places. It's just that simple. Big up Dominica, big up David Fisher, big up Anthony YouTube, big up NJGTV, big FRG, Joseph Gordon Dalgleish, Andre Rodriguez, Striker, Julius, Kieran, Isaac Blings. Let me tell you something, big up Telstar, AA13 Afro Soul, The Box, Joker, big up Joker, Kizzy, good evening Bleep, Mr. Luca in the chat. Shout out to Muhammad Ali, the champ is here. Ocean Blue. Benjamin, big up. Yes, Joker, what it do, what it do. All right, so some people or somebody there mentioned the Frank Warren show this evening. I didn't actually see it. Who was on the Frank Warren show? Somebody said it was surprisingly good. Can anybody tell me who was on the Frank Warren show? Andre Rodriguez says that they still own MTK. MTK is defunct. MTK no longer exists. Once the fact that they had some involvement in it went mainstream, then basically they got blackballed from the industry and they had to shut down. Anybody watch the Frank Warren show? Because somebody mentioned it earlier on in the chat. Was it any good? All he says is, Fury still banned from America. I don't think he was ever actually banned from America. Or if he was, I think, don't quote me on this, that ban is over. The issue is that he's wanted by the authorities in America for questioning regarding his association. So he doesn't want to face that kind of questioning, presumably. The same with Coogan, right? He's apparently, not like they're going to arrest him, but they want to question him. They want to ask him some questions about his association with said individual, you know? And those guys don't want to be brought in by the authorities in question because maybe they wouldn't feel safe after that. Jack Thompson says, Warren's best shows are the ones which get the least promotion. Let me look it up now. Since there's no one responding to, I guess nobody saw. There was only one person maybe who saw the show in the live chat. So before we get into the topics of today's stream, just want to look up this Frank Warren show. Quick way to do that is type in Frank Warren Box Rec. Yes, promoters do have Box Rec pages, folks. And it will show you all the shows right there. Let's have a look. What are we on? 17th of the 4th. The Hydro in Glasgow. Let's see it here. All right, so there was Nathaniel Collins versus Cristobal Lorente. Royston Barney Smith versus Conor McIntosh. Dylan Arbuckle versus Nico Levaz. Aston Brown versus Sam Gilly. Marcus Sutherland versus Latif Alabi. So, I mean, look, maybe there was maybe there was some competitive fights on there, but looking at the rundown, it's definitely a skippable show for me. Look, there are exciting fights, there are entertaining fights at all levels in boxing. I'm not being snobby here, but I have seen some of the fighters like Royston Barney Smith and stuff like that, and to me, they're just, nah. They don't do it for me, so I'm not sure I'll actually go check this show out. But big up anyone who did. It's a crazy name though, isn't it? Arbuckle. We're in partridge territory with Arbuckle. All right, so let's get this party started here. Let's talk about the show tomorrow, which I will be watching. Headlined by Ben Whittaker versus Brian, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's, I think, a version of the name Brian Suarez, an Argentine fighter who fought Lyndon Arthur a while back. Lost to Lyndon Arthur. This is apparently on relatively short notice. There was somebody, I think it was Mike, big up Mike in my Element group, who was wondering about Ben Whittaker's weight here because he's weighed in at over 180 pounds. And he's thinking, is Ben Whittaker struggling to make weight already? Well, not necessarily, because he's taken this fight on relatively short notice, and it's quite common for fighters on the way up when they're fighting in non-title bouts. You know, no British title, no European title, no Intercontinental WBC title, when it's just a standard bout with no sanctioning body attached to it as far as, you know, the 4 major sanctioning bodies. It's quite common for the fighters to not stick to a particular weight class limit. For Conor Benn, we'll get onto him. For Ben Whittaker, it would be 175. But he's coming here over 180 pounds. That's not particularly unusual. Anthony Yard, just to throw this out there, has fought above 175 pounds 16 times in his career. 16 times. I think he's only had about 27, 28 fights. 16 of them, he's fought over 175. From the very start of his career, he was doing that. Errol Spence, same thing. You go back and look at Errol Spence's early fights. In fact, Errol Spence fought Chris Van Heerden at nearly 160 pounds. Right? And if you think it's just bigger fighters who do that, no, even fighters who are not particularly big at the weight have been known to do that too. Dimitri Bivol, for example, at least earlier on in his career, was known for being quite a small light heavyweight. And yet he fought several fights early on in his career above the 175 pound limit. So it's not particularly unusual for fighters, and there's no rule against it. If there's no title on the line, you know, domestic, area level, world, if there's no title, then the two fighters just agree what weight they're going to fight at, and they come in at that weight or below a particular weight. So it's quite a common thing. So it doesn't necessarily indicate that Ben Whittaker's struggling at the weight, although he could be. We don't know. We'll see. Anyway, he takes on this Brian Suarez guy, an Argentine fighter. Get his box rec up here. He is 21-4. 20 of his 21 wins by knockout. 3 of his 4 defeats by knockout. 34 years of age, 6 feet tall, from Buenos Aires. He is one of these guys, if you haven't watched him fight, who's either going to knock you out or get knocked out himself trying. That's the way he fights. He obviously can punch a bit, as you can see from his record, but he's vulnerable to getting stopped. He's vulnerable to the effects of his opponent's punches. 2 of his stoppage defeats were actually inside the first 2 rounds. He was knocked out in the first round and knocked out in the second round. The Arthur fight, his 3rd stoppage defeat, was I think in the 10th round when he got stopped with a body shot. So it's an interesting one for Ben Whittaker at relatively short notice. He was looking to fight somewhere else. It's not that the fight is at relatively short notice for Ben Whittaker, it's the opponent is at relatively short notice. So it's an interesting one because this guy will come and swing, hits hard. If he can manage to get inside Ben Whittaker's wheelhouse, there's the potential there for him to cause problems. But there's loads of potential also for Ben Whittaker to cause Suarez problems. So, yeah, I'll be interested to watch it. Ben Whittaker, when he has the right type of opponent in front of him, is very entertaining. Some people don't like the showboating. I like it. I find it funny. I grew up watching Prince the Scene. I've always liked fighters who are showmen in the ring. I liked Roy Jones back in the days and all the showboating he used to do. So, I realize it's not up everybody's street, but personally, I'm entertained by it. But obviously, if you go out there showboating and then you get turned over, you end up with egg on your face, looking like a donut. Ben Whittaker was nearly in that position, although, ironically, he didn't really showboat in the first Liam Cameron fight. But obviously did it in many fights previous. And he didn't really showboat in the rematch either, as far as I can remember. But, yeah, some people were happy to see Ben Whittaker apparently get his comeuppance, or nearly get his comeuppance, in that first Liam Cameron fight. But then he turned it around in the second fight. There's still a question mark, though, for me, over Ben Whittaker's intestinal fortitude. Because there are some fighters who are so talented, and that talent is there from a young age. Either they're talented or they have massive physical advantages over most of their opponents. And it basically shields their heart. Sounds like I'm talking about romance and dating here. Pause. I'm not. I'm talking about from a boxing context, right? Some fighters have such athleticism and natural ability and physical advantages that most of their opponents, amateur and pro, and even in the gym sparring, never manage to get past the talent and the physicality that they have to be able to test their heart. Vladimir Klitschko was one of those guys. He was just so dominant. Amateur, early in his pro career, sparring. Nobody ever got to test that heart of his until he got in there against Ross Purity. And we found out that maybe that heart is a little suspect. Will it be the same with Ben Whittaker? Because a lot of people are convinced that he bottled it in that first Liam Cameron fight. And I certainly found his reaction to what happened in the Liam Cameron fight to be a little odd. Do you know what I mean? Because that Liam Cameron first fight wasn't exactly the thriller in Manila, was it? It weren't like Ben Whittaker got dropped a bunch of times and cut and wobbled. No. It was a pretty dull affair, to be honest. But Ben Whittaker turned to Jesus after the fight and was talking all this God stuff. I got no issue with somebody turning to Jesus, by the way. I just thought it was a bit of an overreaction to something that wasn't a particularly, from the outside looking in, traumatic fight. You know? Is he a bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Neurotic? Is he somebody that exaggerates how bad situations are in his mind? What do you guys think? And what do you guys expect from this fight tomorrow night between Ben Whittaker and Brian Suarez? Have any of you guys watched Suarez? Shout out to Cobezilla for the super chat. He says, just watch Chisora White. Del was actually quick. Well, a hell of a lot quicker than he is now, for sure. Especially in the second fight. That's when he was working with David Haye. And that's probably the most aesthetically in shape we've ever seen Derek Chisora, was in the second Dillian Whyte fight. He almost had a six-pack in that fight. Ocean Blue says, Whittaker just seems like a typical bonnet wearer to me. I can see it. Cobezilla says, it's crazy how much speed he's lost, foot speed especially. Yeah, Chisora has lost a lot of speed, but he's put on a lot of weight, you know? He's probably, what, 25 pounds heavier now than he was then? And several years older. The Joker says, do you think Ben Whittaker lacks power? He's not a devastating puncher. At least it doesn't seem so at the moment. But I don't think he's feather-fisted either. Because he's so quick, he can catch you with shots that you don't see. Especially early in the fight, he can catch you cold. So, he might be somewhat similar to Amir Khan. Because people used to say that Amir Khan lacks speed, but if you look at Amir Khan's fights, he dropped so many people early, you know? So Khan had some power there, but his speed was a greater factor in dropping people than his power. There was some power, right? It wasn't Paulie. See, Khan wasn't like a Paulie Malignaggi who was genuinely feather-fisted. Khan had some power. It wasn't devastating. It was maybe average, slightly above average. But with the speed he had, he'd just catch you unaware. He'd catch you when you don't see the shot. And to back up what I'm saying, in those fights where Khan dropped people early, they often survived the early onslaught. Or the ones who survived the early onslaught went the whole distance. You know? Which shows that they kind of got used to the speed and the power wasn't able to concuss them. They were able to start focusing and seeing the punches coming after a while. They got, used to it. Their eyes got trained on it. So Whittaker might be something like that, where he's not a devastating puncher, but his speed kind of accentuates his power. It accentuates the power that he does have. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. Big up Adam Fawkes. Adam Fawkes says, Itama versus 90s Ibeabuchi. It's really hard to answer a question like that, given the fact that we don't know as much about Itama as we knew about Ibeabuchi. Ibeabuchi came through firefights. Ibeabuchi beat world-class fighters. Itama hasn't done that as a pro. So it's really hard to answer that. Yeah, really hard to answer that question. But it'd be a hell of a fight. Ibeabuchi never fought anybody as athletic and fast and explosive as Itama. But Itama never fought anyone like Ibeabuchi. That crazy, crazy Nigerian guy, Ike Ibeabuchi, who's still fighting, by the way. He lost the fight recently to some journeyman. Ibeabuchi's what? 50-something years old at this stage? He lost on points to a journeyman recently. But big up Adam Fawkes for the super chat. Yeah, I couldn't even tell you who would win that fight because we don't know enough yet about Itama. Because Ibeabuchi ticked certain boxes when he was around. He could take a punch. He had stamina for days. He could figure guys out. We saw that in the Chris Bird fight where Bird was giving him some issues with his southpaw slickness. Ibeabuchi came with a left uppercut. And poor Chris Bird went down, and when he got back to his feet, he had slob hanging out of his mouth and his eyes were in separate orbit and all that type of stuff. But what do you think though, Adam Fawkes? Do you reckon Itama would beat Ibeabuchi, or would Ibeabuchi smash Itama to pieces? Matt Borgerson says, Ben Whittaker will end up like David Price. I suspect he'll go further than David Price as a pro. I suspect he will. Because once Beterbiev and Bivol are out of the way, who is there really? Benavidez, but how long is Benavidez even going to be at 175? I mean, he's fighting Ramirez at 200 pounds. He may come back down after the fight, but once you've moved up to 200 pounds, are you really going to stick around at 175 for that long? So you take those three guys out of the equation. Beterbiev, Bivol, Benavidez. Who is there at 175? So I suspect he'll do better than David Price as a pro, but we'll see. Big up June Sports. Big up Matt Borges, and he says, I think Ramirez is being grossly underestimated. Benavidez has never fought a cruiserweight. Indeed, he hasn't. But like Benavidez, he's originally a super middleweight moving up. Like Benavidez and Ramirez are basically the same size. Yeah, Ramirez has been cruiserweight for a while, so he's used to fighting the big guys. But this fight right here between Benavidez and Ramirez will basically be a fight between two fat super middleweights. I don't say that to be disrespectful. If you want to be more respectful, you could say two big-boned super middleweights. That's what it's a fight between. Or you could even say two big light heavyweights. So I personally think Benavidez is going to win. I think the speed will be the factor. Now, you go back to when Gilberto Ramirez fought Bivol, he was just totally overwhelmed by the speed. Couldn't do anything with it. Benavidez has hand speed like that. He doesn't have foot speed like Bivol. I do want to be very, very clear on that point. Benavidez does not have anything like Bivol's foot speed, but he does have that kind of hand speed. Now, the foot speed will make it so that, in my view, in my estimation, the Benavidez-Ramirez fight will be a lot more competitive than the Bivol-Ramirez fight was. Because Bivol had the hand speed, but the foot speed was such that after unloading a combination, and they were so fast that Ramirez couldn't counter them, the punches, Bivol would then step out of range with that very quick foot speed, and there was nothing there for Ramirez to hit. Then Bivol would jump on him again, in and out. And Ramirez just couldn't do anything about it the whole night. He was very lucky not to get stopped. I mean, Bivol's never been a massive puncher, but he was just hitting him with so many shots, and he was so overwhelmed. There were moments there where you did wonder whether the fight was going to end by stoppage. But as I say, Benavidez doesn't jump in and out like that. He doesn't have that kind of foot speed, but he does have the hand speed, in my estimation, to overwhelm Zerto Ramirez in a similar fashion, but he's got more power than Bivol. Then again, Ramirez got a very good chin. Very good chin. So yeah, I'm leaning towards Benavidez. The only thing is, I'm not sure exactly how disciplined Ramirez is, but I suspect he's more disciplined than Benavidez. Benavidez, as we know, has had issues with substances outside the ring and all that kind of thing. Apparently a bit of a party guy. So you do wonder about that. Shout out to Glum Coyote. Long time no see, brother. He says, I've always found Whittaker effortless, cool, too effortless to be cool. Yeah, Whittaker is quite a fun fighter to watch. When he's doing all the showboating and then switching from showboating to punching. It's very Prince Nassim-esque. Doesn't have pound for pound the kind of power Prince Nassim had, but it harkens back to that stuff. So, yeah, I do quite like watching Ben Whittaker when he's in his full flow as well. Big up Glum Coyote. Matt Borgerson says, I favor Bivol in that fight. Bivol is just better. I guess you mean Bivol versus Benavidez? I think that Benavidez gives Bivol absolute hell. I might be in a minority on that, but I do think that he gives him absolute hell. Especially at 175. I think at cruiserweight, weirdly enough, because of the fact that I expect Benavidez to be somewhat slower at cruiserweight, Bivol might have a easier time with him. It sounds counterintuitive at the higher weight class. But 175, I think that's a hellish fight for Bivol. Because although Benavidez might not hit quite as hard as Beterbiev, he throws a hell of a lot more punches. And he's got a very underrated boxing brain. He's very creative with his offense, the way he comes in, sets up his shots. He throws unusual punch sequences. I mean, we saw that against Anthony Yarde when he threw 8 left hooks in a row? Or was it 8 right hands in a row? The punch sequences are so unusual. Fighters aren't used to having to defend against weird punch sequences like that. And that's one of the things that you'll see with a lot of these guys that have, at world level, a high number of stoppages, is they throw unusual punch sequences. See, most fighters are trained to defend against a 1-2 left hook. You know what I mean? Left hand, right hand. After a left, they expect a right. Then you get these prolific knockout artists who come at you with a jab, a left hook, then a left uppercut. 3 different types of punch with one hand, with the same hand. An unusual punch sequence. Do you know what I mean? Mike Tyson used to do stuff like that. I remember Mike Tyson fought a guy called, I think it was David Jameson. Something Jameson. Anyway, big Irish-American guy who ended up as one of Mike Tyson's sparring partners. And when they fought, Tyson stopped him, I think, in the 5th. Excuse me. And the finishing combination, Mike Tyson opened up with all these hooks to Jameson's big rotund body. But he was blocking most of the hooks, although some of them were hitting him in the body. He was blocking the headshots. Then Mike Tyson switched it and threw about 3 or 4 consecutive left uppercuts. Like, what heavyweight throws 3 or 4 left uppercuts in a row at tremendous speed? You know? So, yeah, unusual punch sequences are one of the keys that a lot of these prolific punchers have to unlocking the opponent's defense. And David Benavidez, he has that. He has the unusual sequences. And that's something that Artur Beterbiev doesn't have. Artur Beterbiev, very strong, an accurate puncher, a hard puncher, cuts the ring off quite well, all that kind of thing. But his punch sequences are relatively conventional. Matt Borgerson says, Benavidez' feet are like Bob Arum's though. Hey, that's something I heard about Bob Arum, by the way, is that he's actually going to do another TV deal, and the DAZN deal is only one of the deals he's doing. Was it Eddie Hearn who I heard that from? I can't remember now, but there was somebody I was watching an interview of the other day, and they said that, yeah, Bob Arum's doing a different TV deal with another broadcaster. Interesting. So the DAZN deal is apparently not exclusive. Because I did think when the DAZN deal was announced, that's a pretty limited deal. Not that many shows, you know? If he's doing a deal with a different company, maybe he's back in the game in a big way and he's still got a roster of fighters there. Star Fox says, I thought Bob Arum was ill. Man's doing TV deals from the hospital bed. Blood clot. All right, let's move on then to the main topic of today's stream. Conor Benn signs a 2-year, 5-fight deal with Zuffa Boxing. Now, nobody's surprised by this. The Regis Prograis fight was supposed to be a one-fight deal for $15 million. Eddie Hearn was never convinced that that's what the deal was. He has inferred in many, many, many interviews that it was a multi-fight deal from the beginning. If he can prove that it was, then there's a chance that he can actually sue Zuffa. Because think about it. He had matching rights for Conor Benn. Zuffa allegedly made Conor Benn this $15 million one-fight deal. Eddie Hearn's then trying to match a $15 million one-fight deal. He's going to the zone and saying, you know, can we get money from there to do this $50 million one-fight deal? And apparently all the financial backers are like, nah, not for one fight. Maybe if we can get it for a few fights, we'll do the $15 million. But for one fight, no, we're not doing it. Now, Eddie Hearn could have put his hand in his own pocket. As Dana White has said, Eddie Hearn and his dad Barry got plenty of money. But they didn't feel like they wanted to do that with their own money. Sign Conor Benn to a $15 million one-fight deal. So, if it was falsely represented to Eddie Hearn that it was a one-fight deal, and it was actually a multi-fight deal, they've basically, if that's true, they've basically misled him. How could he match the deal when the deal wasn't the way it was being presented? You see what I'm saying? So there's going to be some legal maneuverings going on behind the scenes. Eddie Hearn's going to be trying to prove that it was a multi-fight deal from the beginning. All right? So maybe it was a one-fight deal. Maybe it was a multi-fight deal from the beginning. I'm trying to keep myself in the clear legally here, folks. Because some people in boxing are really petty and they do threaten little YouTube channels. So it's possible that it was a one-fight deal in the beginning, but it's also possible that this announcement of Conor Benn doing a multi-fight deal with Zuffa is just window dressing. Or that the one-fight deal, was window dressing, and this was the real deal behind it the whole time. So anyway, as I say, it's a 2-year, 5-fight deal. There's Conor Benn about to sign. Here he actually is signing. Shaking hands with Dana White again. There he is on the couch, posing like some superstar. And look at the caption below. 8-figure fighter with a bag of money there. And here he is cackling. Like some kind of villain. So, I want to address this part here. 8-figure fighter. Because Conor Benn loves boasting about all the money he makes. And that's nothing unusual in boxing. Loads of fighters boast about the money they make. Devin Haney and, loads of guys do it. The difference with Conor Benn, though, is that he likes to deride other fighters about all the money that he makes, with no acknowledgement of the fact that if he didn't have his dad's surname, if he wasn't Nigel Benn's son, he wouldn't be making a fraction of that money. How can you mock other fighters, like he did Duke McKenzie, for example, for not making the money that he's made, when those guys didn't have the kind of leg up in the industry that he's had? It's as if Conor Benn wants us to believe that he's making all this money purely because of his talent and hard work. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that he inherited a brand. That's literally what it was for Conor Benn. He inherited the Benn brand, which was built by his dad. And his dad built that brand from the ground up through winning world title fights. Right? His rivalry with Chris Eubank Sr. Beating people like Gerald McClellan, Sugar Boy Malinga, Iran Barkley, Doug DeWitt, etc., etc. That's how Nigel Benn, through blood, sweat, and tears, hard work, talent, ability, built the Benn name into a brand in the UK and to some extent globally. Conor Benn's come along and he has inherited that brand. He's piggybacked off that brand, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. At the end of the day, most parents don't want their kids to struggle like they struggled. They want their kids to benefit off whatever they've built. So there's nothing wrong with being a kid that comes from privilege or money. The issue is when you don't acknowledge the fact that much of your success comes from the fact you had a leg up in life. So why would you be boasting and deriding other fighters? You don't make all this money. I'm an 8-figure fighter. And he does do this all the time. He boasts in the face of other fighters about all the money he's making. But those fighters didn't have a leg up. Those fighters had to get it out of the mud. Those fighters never had a famous dad. What are you talking about? Again, but Conor acts like he's built it all himself or something. And he deserves to be where he is purely because of the talent and ability he has, or the business acumen or something. It's a very, very strange mindset. And it really, to me, speaks to a complete lack of self-awareness, or maybe a lack of shame, or maybe both. I don't know. Indeed, Evil Uncle Phil. He's got some of that arrogance hanging around with Hearn. They relate on that level, yeah. We got Mr. Classic Metal. He says, Conor Benn and Eubank Jr. do have a few things in common, it seems. Ben just managed to take it a bit further, and it's definitely not all positive. Big up Mr. Classic Metal. Yeah, Eubank Jr. was never as much of a gimmick fighter as Conor Benn. Eubank Jr. actually did fight real guys. Okay, he fought a load of cream puffs on the way up, but then he fought Billy Joe Saunders, who's a real fighter. He fought George Groves, who was a real world champion. Do you know what I mean? Like, he did actually step up, Eubank Jr. Whereas Conor Benn never has. He just seems to be going all the way with his gimmick thing. And he's doing all the diabolical catch weights and all that type of stuff. And that's another thing which we'll come on to, actually, is the incredible hypocrisy of Conor Benn. The fact that originally, he tried to fight Chris Eubank Jr. at a catch weight. What was it? 158 or 157 or something? That was the original weight for the fight that got cancelled. The only reason it got moved up to 160 is because Conor Benn failed those 2 tests. So he no longer had the same amount of leverage at the negotiating table. So they made it at 160, but then there was a rehydration clause for both fights. And then Conor Benn, he hasn't yet fought a 147 since those days when he was fighting the Chris Algiris and Van Heerdens of the world. But then he does this interview here. Any of you guys see this one? Calling Shakur Stevenson cowardly. Because Shakur Stevenson said he'll fight him at 147, but there has to be some type of rehydration clause. And Conor Benn is saying, no, this guy's a coward. You couldn't make it up. He just fought Chris Eubank Jr. twice with a rehydration clause. Didn't want to get in there against Lewis Crocker, who apparently offered him a title shot. Eddie Hearn has exposed this now. When Conor Benn was still with Hearn, Hearn offered him to fight against Crocker. It's right there for you, world title shot. Don't you want a world title? Well, is there a rehydration limit on the day of the fight? Yeah. No, thank you. Unbelievable, this guy. The hypocrisy is crazy. It's looking like these two want to fight each other, Conor Benn and Ryan Garcia. But what weight division will it be at? Conor Benn is saying he's only got 2 fights left at 147. But again, he hasn't fought at 147 for several years. The Prograis fight was at 150. So what's he actually going to be like at 147? I got Ryan Garcia over him at 147 all day long, 7 days a week, twice on Sunday. After that performance against Prograis. And apparently Prograis has come out and said Conor Benn's the hardest puncher he's been in with. Okay, Conor Benn came in the ring weighing God knows what. It was a fight at 150. Regis Prograis been a career 140 pounder. It's not really a big deal, is it? If Conor Benn's the hardest puncher he's been in with his whole career, when his whole career has been at 140. Conor Benn must have weighed what? Close to 170 on the night against Prograis, I would imagine. So damn right he's going to be hitting you harder than anyone you've been in the ring with before. And despite that, Ben still couldn't get him out of there. And in fact, another thing I should mention, again, I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen this interview. Right here, it's on the Fight Hype YouTube channel, uploaded earlier on today. The interviewer asked Conor Benn what his plans were, how long he was looking to stay around at welterweight. He said 2 more fights. And then the interviewer said, well, so you're looking to move up to 154 then next? You know, after your 2 more fights at welterweight. What names are you looking at 154? Conor Benn said that he would fight Sebastian Fundora. Yeah, okay. I'll believe that when I see it. Because these were the names that, I think that's the way it went anyway in the interview. Don't quote me, but I think the interviewer was like mentioning names of 154 and Conor Benn was like, yeah, I'll fight him. Sebastian Fundora. Conor Benn is going to fight Sebastian Fundora. Yeah, like I say, I'll believe that when I see it. Ben seemed to want to move on from talking about 154 and the Fundoras of the world, and he seemed more interested in talking about fighting at 160. Because you got the likes of Carlos Adames moving up to 168. Aleem Kanuli is MIA ever since that failed PED test. So who's there? Erislandy Lara? Conor Benn's looking at it, I have to imagine, as a weaker division than 154. And he's like, yep, I'll have a bit of that. Oh, this guy's too much. Striker says Fundora versus Ben would be hilarious. AA13 says the way Conor improved after the Payno fight, improved so drastically after the Payno fight, is crazy in hindsight. Guzi says, Garcia Ben, Clomiphene versus Osterine. Will there be VADA testing if that fight happens? You know what? I thought that Conor Benn buckled Prograis' knees in the first round. He actually didn't. At least not at the end of the round. I've got a screenshot of it, in fact. You know when Prograis stumbled right before the bell at the end of the first round? It's because Conor Benn stepped on his foot. I didn't realize that until I watched the fight back. And I was like, oh, damn, he just stepped on his foot. He wasn't actually hurt at all. Yeah, Evil Uncle Phil saw it too. He just stepped on his foot. At the time, it seemed like he'd hurt him, but no, he just stepped on his foot. The old Grizz for the super chat, he says, is Zuffa just misfits with better quality fighters? No, I wouldn't characterize it that way. Misfits is really all the way out there in terms of doing outlandish, outrageous, shock value things in order to garner an audience, because most of the fighters, or all of the fighters, are influencers, or most of them are influencers. So it's all about them just doing the most outrageous and saying outrageous things. With Zuffa, it's not so much that. I mean, there's a little bit of it, but not to the extent that Misfits do it. It's literally just the UFC model, you know? The same kind of marketing as UFC, all that kind of thing. But big up Grizz for the super chat. Much appreciated. In Circle says, Zuffa is not Misfits, it's more rejects. Exactly that. Double A, the Americans see Ben as an easy payday. Exactly that. And it was cringe. Which show was it where Ben got up in the ring and he was taking photos next to some of the best fighters in boxing at the moment? And it was like, what the hell's going on there? Why is Ben standing next to all these like great fighters as if he's one of them? As if he's on the Mount Rushmore. What on earth is all that about? And Ben really believes that. Or he seems to. He seems to believe he's a great fighter. As well as seeming to believe that he's making all the money that he's making mainly because of his ability and hard work. Nothing to do with his dad's name. Nothing to do with inheriting the Ben brand that his dad built. Remarkable. Double A says, I think it was Shakur versus Tio. Was it that fight that he did it? It was so weird, bro. I remember he got in the ring and he was facing off with Shakur after their fight. But was that the one where he was also posing with all the great fighters in the ring? That was so weird. Shout out to Andre Rodriguez. He says, best performance, Usyk against AJ in the first fight or Bivol against Canelo? I'm definitely going to say Usyk against AJ in the first fight because of the size difference. You know, at the end of the day, Bivol was fighting a much smaller guy, whereas Usyk was fighting a much bigger guy. But what do you think, Andre? Do you agree or disagree? What was the size difference between AJ and Usyk in that fight? Was it like 25 pounds? I think Usyk was about 217, if I remember correctly, for that. Or was he 220? Because his first couple of fights at heavyweight, he was under 220. I can't remember if the first AJ fight was one of them, though. I've been live for just under an hour now. Okay, he was 221. AJ was 240. Okay, so he was like best part of 20 pounds lighter than AJ. So Armin says, Ben gets devoured at 54. I completely agree. Yeah, well, we actually didn't make too many Conor Hen jokes, but we're talking about Conor Benn right now. Earlier on, we were talking about Ben Whittaker. He's got a fight coming up tomorrow against an Argentine fighter, which might be entertaining while it lasts. The Argentine opponent, Suarez, is one of these guys who either knocks you out or gets knocked out trying. Yeah, I think with Shakur Stevenson, it isn't just that he sees Conor Benn as an easy payday. He actually enjoys trolling Conor Benn. Like, to me, it seems blatantly obvious that Stevenson loves winding Conor Benn up. He loves it. And I'm sure he thinks that Ben deserves to be wound up because of the fact that Ben is a joker. And I don't mean he's a comedian. I mean the stuff I've been talking about throughout this stream. Here we have a guy who's a total hypocrite, who's bringing Prograis up nearly 2 weight classes, who's fighting Chris Eubank Jr. with a rehydration clause both times. But then when it's time for him to agree to fight with a rehydration clause for the IBF welterweight title, he don't want to do it. He won't fight Shakur Stevenson at 147 with a rehydration clause either. The hypocrisy is wild. And I think Shakur sees all that in Conor Benn. He sees this guy who thinks he's making all this money mainly because of his talent and hard work, not because of his dad's name. And Shakur wants to troll him over it. Who do I see Shakur fighting next? Let me get up the 140-pound rankings in front of me so I don't have to go off memory. So, who we got here? There's the other champions, Richardson Hitchens, Gary Antoine Russell, Dalton Smith, Isaac Cruz, interim champion. He could fight any one of those guys. As far as contenders, Keyshawn Davis. I don't think Adam Azim would fight Shakur Stevenson at this stage. Yeah, so it's probably going to be one of the... He'll probably aim for one of the champions. Will he get one of the champions after doing what he did to Teofimo Lopez? It's questionable, isn't it? I hope he gets one of them. A Hitchens, Gary Antoine Russell, a Dalton Smith, but yeah, Shakur might be too good for his own good. What do you guys think? Who do you reckon is odds on to be Stevenson's next opponent? Inoue versus Nakatani, I've definitely got Inoue. 100%. Tony says, interestingly, Duke McKenzie and Dwyer have both said that Gary Antoine Russell gives them the toughest fight, but I agree with you. I think it will be Floyd Schofield. I don't see Gary Antoine Russell giving Shakur much trouble at all. Maybe they see something I don't, but yeah, I don't see that as being an extremely difficult fight for Shakur. I don't see it. And by the way, Gary Antoine Russell is the younger brother of Gary Russell, right? They are brothers, not cousins, innit? Why are they both called Gary? Like, who the hell gives their kids the same first name? The only other person I can think of in boxing that did that was George Foreman. Maybe he had more after this, but I remember when he fought Adelson Rodriguez and he was being interviewed by Larry Merchant, and Merchant mentioned the fact that he had at least 3 or 4 sons at the time, and all of them were named George. It's so weird. Why would you do that? Gruzy says, George is such an old name. Yeah, and that's another one as well, yeah. The dad was called George, the dad's called Gary, hence Gary Russell Jr. And then he's called 2 of his sons Gary as well. Oh, he's got 2 brothers called Gary. So the dad and then 3 brothers all called Gary. Man's moving mad out here. What is all that about? It just gets confusing in the house. And confusing in the neighborhood. Going to school and all the boys are called Gary. All the boys are called Gary Russell. So which Gary Russell are you talking about, when you're at school? Glom Coyote says, so you believe Ben has such a self-delusional mind, it's psychotic almost. Yeah. He's not as extreme as Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder might actually be psychotic. He's so delusional. The nonsense that he convinces himself of is so wild that he actually might be psychotic, genuinely. With Conor Benn, I don't think he's quite as extreme as that. But with him, it might not be as pathological. It might be more calculated, He on some level knows that he's a BS artist, but he convinces himself otherwise, for his ego. Arman says, T.O. is the most delusional man in boxing. I still think it's Wilder. Like, I've never seen anything like Deontay Wilder in terms of delusion. Deontay Wilder convinced himself for years that everybody was terrified of him. Even Fury. He convinced himself that Fury was terrified of him too. He had this self-perception which was so far from reality. It was crazy. I mean, any of you guys remember when Anthony Joshua signed to fight him on a Riyadh season show? And all Deontay had to do was beat, Deontay and AJ. AJ beat Wallin and then Ngannou. Wilder just had to beat Parker. And then he and AJ were going to fight. It was already signed. After Wilder lost to Parker, he said, AJ was planning to retire if I'd beaten Joseph Parker. Unbelievable. Unflipping believable. He was saying AJ was planning to retire had I beaten Joseph Parker. And this guy is an absolute space cadet. And the most extreme thing was the excuses after the second Partridge fight. He had egg weights in his gloves. He was poisoned by Mark Breland. The referee was in on the plot. His suit was too heavy. I mean, you name it. Absolute whack job. And then, of course, and it's continued in the Chisora fight, or after the Chisora fight, should I say. Oh, I let him go the distance. I held back because I wanted him to spend time with his family. And I mean, what a load of absolute rubbish. As I've said in several videos, and big up Craig, by the way, because I think it was him in the Element group who posted a video of Shawn Michaels in a WWE wrestling match. He was up against Ric Flair and he was about to knock Ric Flair out with a Sweet Chin Music, you know, the kick to the chin. And Flair was obviously a hero of his. So Shawn Michaels turned to him and says, "I'm sorry, I love you." And then hit him with a Sweet Chin Music and knocked him out. And that is exactly what Deontay Wilder tried to do against Chisora in that 8th round when he had him up in the corner after dropping him. He was holding back because he knew Chisora liked to counter off the ropes. That's how he dropped Joe Joyce. And he hit Wilder with that counter a few times early on in the fight. So Wilder was just trying to see if that counter was coming. And then he did the whole, "I love you." And then he threw the massive right hand. And that's the guy claiming after the fight that he held back to try and save Chisora's life? Why throw the massive right hand then? That's just an absolute delusional whack job. You know, he has come up with that ridiculous narrative to save face over the fact that he couldn't get rid of a career heaviest 43-year-old Derek Chisora with 13 losses on his record, who'd been knocked out cold before in his prime. But in order for Wilder to be able to look himself in the mirror, to be able to get up every day and not fall into a deep depression, he has to convince himself of this nonsense. Yeah, I agree with you, Glum Coyote. Wilder is a simpleton. Yes, he's definitely a simpleton. He's not a very bright guy. Guzzi says ayahuasca made him worse. It may have made him worse as a fighter, yeah. I don't think it's really made him worse as far as being delusional, because as far as I remember, all the egg weights and gloves and all that kind of stuff happened before the ayahuasca. Big up, it's only a game. Yep, smash the like button, peeps, if you would. Really helps these streams get seen. Thank you in advance. Paolo the Greek says, Wilder stays up late to study for a urine test. Double A13 says, Shelley Finkel admitted that his own offer. Crazy he turned that down. Yeah, it is crazy. And it's crazy. What's even more crazy than the fact he turned that down is the fact that Wilder fans and a lot of Fury fans still persistently, to this day, as Wilder likes to say, make out as though AJ ducked the Wilder fight his whole career. In order for the Zone to have made that offer of over $100 million to Deontay Wilder, obviously, AJ had to agree. If he didn't want the fight, then why did he send Hearn and DAZN and all that kind of stuff to make Wilder that offer? What is up with the cognitive dissonance with Wilder and Fury fanboys that they can't accept the reality that that offer was made and it was a legitimate offer? This whole thing about, oh, we had to turn it down because we didn't know what AJ was getting is irrelevant, because he never was offered or got anywhere close to that money before or since then. Furthermore, the way the Saudis do it, you negotiate your own deal with them separate to your opponent, so you never know what your opponent's getting. Wilder fought on 2 Saudi shows against Joseph Parker and against Zhilei Zhang. He didn't need to know how much they were getting. Now, I'm not saying Wilder was scared of AJ and that's the reason he turned down the offer. No, I don't think so at all. I think Wilder turned down that offer because he's stupid. That's why. Because he had people whispering in his ear like Shelley Finkel and maybe Al Heyman, who, in my opinion, were not acting in his best interest, but instead were acting on the best interest of Fox or Showtime. Because remember, DAZN were new in the space at the time. Fox and Showtime would not have wanted this new competitor, this new rival in the boxing space to get the biggest fight in the sport. They wouldn't have wanted that. So in my opinion, they kept Wilder away from that. Because imagine he goes to DAZN, has a fight with AJ. Let's say it's a good fight, but he loses. Then they have a rematch. And it goes so well and he makes so much money. Now he wants to sign a long-term deal with DAZN. PBC didn't want that. The broadcasters definitely didn't want that. So in my opinion, that's why the fight didn't happen. I don't think Deontay was scared. I just think because he's stupid and easily manipulatable by the people around him, they steered him away from it for that reason. It's only a game, says his first offer was $15 million. That was a joke for an undisputed fight. That was going to be at Wembley. Joshua. No, that wasn't a joke for undisputed, because that was prior to the Saudis being involved. It wasn't a joke. Deontay Wilder at that time was making about $2 or $3 million a fight. $2 or $3 million a fight. AJ's offering him $15 million. You're talking about many, many, many times more than Wilder's highest purse up to that point. Joshua was making about, what, $20 million a fight at that time? So that was a perfectly fair offer, actually. That was perfectly fair. That was before DAZN were really getting involved in those negotiations and, upping the money. That was more from Hearn and Sky and all that kind of thing at the time. And that was a perfectly reasonable offer. 15 mil for Wilder when he was making 2 or 3 mil a fight. Yeah. Big up Glum Coyote. He says, I agree with you about Wilder, but I think Ben is deeply conscious of his misery. All his boasting, similar to a rap artist, is generated by his deep-seated malaise. Yeah, it could be. Conor Benn might have Napoleon syndrome, you know? I've seen Conor Benn in person, and he's very small, as you'd expect, a very small guy. No, I don't blame AJ at all in the situation with Wilder, because again, they made several offers to Deontay Wilder. The first one was perfectly reasonable, 15 mil for Wilder, when Wilder was making 2 or 3 mil a fight. Perfectly reasonable at the time. They upped the offer when they got DAZN to really put their hands in the pockets to 50 million. 100 million. It would have been around 40 million for the 2 AJ fights and 20 million for his defense against Dominic Breazeale. I mean, 20 million for his defense against... That's what Wilder was being offered. And the Dominic Breazeale fight was a mandatory. So it's not like DAZN were asking him to take a fight that he wouldn't already be taking. Because when he turned that down, he went and fought Dominic Breazeale anyway. All right? Can you imagine? They were offering Deontay Wilder $20 million to fight Dominic Breazeale, which he was going to do anyway, and then 2 fights with Anthony Joshua, 40 mil apiece, or whatever it would have been. You know, let's say 50 mil for the first fight and 30 mil for the second fight. If he lost, or maybe the inverse of that if he won. Whatever the case may be, it would have totaled up to about 80 million. And there were some reports that actually said it was more like 110 million that he was offered. Meaning 20 million for Breazeale, and then 90 million for the 2 AJ fights. At that time, that was insane money. I mean, it's crazy money even now, but for the time, before the Saudis got involved, that was insane money. Wilder was making like 2-3 million a fight. And now he's being offered like, you know, over 10 times that just for one of the Joshua fights. Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? When, like, normally, not always, but normally, sons end up being bigger than their fathers, right? But Conor Benn is like significantly smaller than his dad. So maybe that Napoleon syndrome, which I think he might have, is partly based in that. He's smaller than his dad. Most people are bigger than their dads. I'm bigger than my dad. Look at Chavez Jr. compared to his dad. Chavez Jr. like 3 times the size of his dad. Chavez Jr. can pick his dad up and put him in his pocket. Right next to his spliff. Well, for example, my mom is short, but yet I'm still way bigger than my dad, even though I got a short mom. I mean, have you seen Lennox Lewis's mum? Lennox Lewis's mum, Violet, can't be any more than 5'4". He's 6'5". So yeah, so obviously, if you have a short mum, you can still end up being short yourself. But in most of the instances I can think of, even with short mums involved, the sons are still bigger than the dad. But somehow with Conor Benn, it's like really tiny guy. Yeah, I saw that on TalkSport as well with Joe Gallagher suggesting that Fraser Clark would take the Wilder fight. Why not? What's he got to lose? Andre Rodriguez says, my mother is tiny, 1 meter 51. I ended up taller than my dad at 179. Yeah. And most people I know are taller than their dads. Not by a massive amount, but they are at least as tall, if not taller. I mean, look at Luke Partridge. His dad's 6'3", and Luke is at least 6'7". Same with Shane's. Shane must be about 6'5". But there is an exception there with Tommy. Tommy's actually shorter than John. And by the way, I've never seen Lennox Lewis's dad, but I read his autobiography. And if that actually is his real dad, I don't know. But what I do know is that Lennox Lewis has got a brother, and his brother's way shorter than he is. His brother actually looks quite like him in the face, but he's kind of chubby. You used to see him at his fights and whatnot. And I'm not sure if they have the same dad or not. I'm not 100%. But according to Lennox Lewis's autobiography, his dad is about 5'7". So his mum can't be any taller than 5'4". His dad's 5'7". He's flipping 6'5". Shout out to George for the super chat. He says, fantasy fight Deontay Wilder versus Danny Williams. I got to take Deontay Wilder in that fight. Yeah, Danny Williams' feet stuck in mud. Yeah, he can punch. And on his day, he might be able to chin Wilder, but too erratic for me. I'd have to say Wilder by knockout. What do you think, though, George? In fact, one of the wildest disparities in height between father and son would be Bill Gates. Any of you guys seen Bill Gates' dad? I don't know what Bill Gates is. Is he like 5'9", 5'10"? His dad was massive. Bill Gates' dad was like a basketball player, and then Bill's like a normal height. It's only a game says must have tall grandfathers. It's odd having super short parents and being super tall. Yeah, apparently it was Lennox Lewis's grandmother that was really tall. So in the autobiography, they suggested that's where he got his height from his grandmother. Because his parents are both really short. Yeah, Trump's son must be 6'7" or something crazy. Tony S says Trump's son is 6'9". There you go. Paolo the Greek says, what is John Fury's actual job? That's a good question. that is actually a good question. What is his job? Is he Tommy's manager? Is that his job? Like, how does he actually earn a living? Has Tyson he claims Tyson's never given him a penny. I'm not sure I believe that, but who knows? Maybe it's true. Even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. What is his actual job? Andre says, John is the family biological stereo. Jan says, have you ever noticed Tyson Fury's mum is never mentioned? Yeah, it's a bit like the Dubois, isn't it? None of the mums of the Fury boys are ever mentioned, because John's got kids by several different women, and you never see him. With Huey, his mum has appeared in interviews before with Peter, but John's baby mums are nowhere to be seen. And the same goes for the Dubois. Stan's got all these kids that live with him except for Caroline. Well into adulthood, still living with him. You don't see any women around. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Not that the women have to be in the limelight, but you'd expect that they at least appear in like a documentary somewhere or somewhere in the background. Do you know what I mean? With a face blurred out or something, but you never see anything. You never see them. You never hear about them. Nothing. And in this day and age of social media and all that kind of stuff, it's unusual. Striker says, John Partridge is a humble man who just wants to live in peace surrounded by nature. Tony says there's actually 5 Gary Russell brothers, all called Gary. 5? No, the dad's weird. Because the dad's called Gary too. 5 sons all called Gary? That is so strange. Yeah, Caroline is relatively normal for a Dubois. She's a little socially awkward and, slightly on the shy side. She's just coming out of her shell a bit now. But compared to Daniel, she speaks a lot more normally, and she's been trying some trash talk lately, which is a bit cringe. But when she's not doing the trash talking stuff, yeah, she's definitely a lot more eloquent and a bit less socially awkward than Daniel. Yeah, Glum Coyote. Hygiene was always a big thing as far as, hygiene and nutrition were 2 big things regarding how big people would grow. And also, if we're going to be real, they inject all these animals with steroids. Do you know what I mean? They're injecting all these animals with steroids and growth hormone, and then we are eating these animals that have been injected with steroids and growth hormone. So that's got to be a factor as well as far as people getting bigger. It's Only a Game says there's a town in the USA called Gary. There's probably several. I know of Gary, Indiana, but I imagine there may be more than that. Okay, Pickney Boy says Garcia's got quit in him. Ben's got the ability to throw up to 600 punches with power. At 147, he was in there against the 140-pounder at the end of his career, pushing 40, who'd been dropped by Devin Haney, hurt by Jojo Diaz, full of injuries. Ben couldn't even hurt him. At the end of the first round, after I watched the fight back, and other people in the chat can confirm this, when it appeared that he hurt Prograis, he didn't actually hurt him at all. He stepped on Prograis' foot. So, I don't know, man. I've got Garcia all the way. If the Conor Benn fight happens at 147, I got Garcia all the way. Yeah, Garcia does blow hot and cold. I'll definitely give you that. But I think Conor Benn might have messed himself up moving up to 160. Because even at 150, he just doesn't look the same as the way he looked before he moved up. His face looked gaunt. His movement didn't look as, I don't know how to describe it, but it just don't look the same. Big up AA13. Have a good one. Pickney Boy says, I'll choose Ben, hard work and aggression. Okay. Fair enough. I'm not going to tell you it's ridiculous because at the end of the day, Ryan Garcia did lose to Rolly Romero. And not many of us expected that. So I'm not going to tell you it's a ridiculous pick, but personally, I got Garcia over Ben all day long at 147. It's only a game says 2 drug cheats. I hope there's a knockout. Big up Anthony YouTube. Just finished the gym session. Encircle says Romero would beat Ben easily. Yeah, I think Romero would beat Ben as well. It's only a game, says Hatman. What do you think of Floyd losing his gym to Manny? I think that Floyd Mayweather was a genius in the ring and an idiot outside of it. And a thoroughly dislikable human being by the looks of it. So, yeah, he's obviously got money problems. He's got his lawyers or accountants or whatever raking over his finances from a decade ago. Trying to find somewhere where he can call some money in. His frivolous spending on just a ridiculous lifestyle was always going to be problematic. Because what happens is when you're making that much money for so long, you start thinking that the money's never going to run out. You don't scale back your lifestyle after you retire. Floyd Mayweather certainly appears not to have done. And you have to. Because you're going to take an enormous drop in earnings once you retire as a boxer. A massive drop. So you need to pare that lifestyle back accordingly. And I always found it just weird the way that you go to Mayweather's social media, like his Instagram page, and all he would post on there I don't know if it's still the same now. I haven't checked for years. But all he would post on his Instagram page is flyers and whatever about his strip clubs. I was like, is that it? You've made all this money in boxing. And this is what your investments amount to? Some strip clubs in Vegas? Like, where's your mind at? You know what I mean? You're posting strip clubs in Vegas and you're still making it rain and the private jet. But how are you actually looking to maintain that lifestyle or elevate that lifestyle or whatever the case may be? You ain't going to do it with strip clubs, my guy. Where's the growth? Do you know what I mean? Where's the maturity as a man in his 40s and now moving on into the 50s? He has a very immature mindset. Little Jacob says, Floyd claims he has made some smart investments. Well, obviously, I'm not privy to his investment portfolio, but again, he's obviously got his financial and legal team raking over his accounts and contracts from over a decade ago. Now, if you were really that flush for money, you wouldn't be doing that. If you were really that flush for money, you wouldn't be having all these exhibitions all the time. Do you know what I mean? So I think Eddie Hearn was actually right a year or so ago when he said, I don't think Mayweather's got the kind of money that he claims he has. Oh, damn. Big up Craig. He says, as soon as I seen Floyd doing double glazing windows adverts, I knew the end was near. Yeah, the way that I would describe Mayweather is just an empty shell. You know, he's an empty vessel. He's a vapid personality. There's nothing there, you know? And I think one of the things that really upsets Mayweather, whether he would admit this or not, I don't know. But I think one of the things that's always really upset him is the fact that he's not loved in the way that Manny Pacquiao's loved or the way that Mike Tyson is loved. I think that's always kind of disturbed him. He doesn't get it. And Circle says Mayweather never made himself lovable. He certainly didn't. But to be fair, did Mike Tyson really make himself lovable? I don't think so. I just think people were so fascinated by it. I think Mike Tyson was just himself. Early on in Mike Tyson's career, when he had people like Steve Lott around him and Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton, they tried to present Mike with a very corporate image. And the bad boy version of Mike Tyson really came after he signed with Don King. It was creeping out a little bit because he was having some bits of trouble outside the ring, which they tried to keep quiet. But this was before the days of the internet. A lot of the public had no idea of the extracurricular stuff Tyson was doing outside the ring. The public image they saw was the guy doing Coca-Cola commercials, Nintendo commercials, appearing on these talk shows where he was kind of awkward and a bit shy and stuff like that. So he had a very corporate image in the Jimmy Jacobs, Bill Caton days. Once he signed with King, the mask was off and the real Mike Tyson came out. And somehow the public fell in love with him. They loved the real Mike Tyson, this uncouth, I don't want to say he was bipolar, but he was certainly volatile, extremely volatile character. He could be a bully. He described himself in his prime as a megalomaniac. And people were just fascinated by Mike Tyson. I don't think he really tried to make himself lovable. He just happened to be someone that captured the public's imagination for whatever reason, a host of different reasons. Encircled says, I would say Tyson became a lot more lovable in the past 15 to 20 years. Well, he was massively loved during his career. Like, the Mike Tyson fanaticism has been extreme all my life, or not all my life. Mike Tyson, I was born before Mike Tyson started, turned professional, but from the mid to late 80s all the way through to the early 2000s, the end of his career, the fanaticism for Mike Tyson was off the scale. And the Mike Tyson fanatics are some of the most fanatical fans of any fighter that you'll ever come across. And they are from all walks of life. That's one of the interesting things about Mike Tyson, because with a lot of fighters, there is a heavy racial or ethnic component to their fan base. Mike Tyson had this universal appeal, irrespective of race, religion, whatever. People from all walks of life are Mike Tyson fanboys. A white guy from Huddersfield in the north of England will be like the biggest Mike Tyson fanboy. Then a black guy from the Bronx. Then some Italian guy, some Greek guy. I mean, just everywhere. There's no real stereotypical demographic that Mike Tyson fanboys come from. They come from everywhere. We got Mr. Classic Metal for the super chat. He says, there was an event a while back where AJ and Floyd were standing next to each other. Fans were shaking AJ's hand and taking pictures, no attention for Floyd. Yeah, I remember that. That was, I think that might have been before the Joseph Parker fight. That was many years ago now. But yeah, I remember that. They didn't care about Floyd. In fact, there was a time when Floyd Mayweather visited Brixton, where I grew up, and Mayweather went into a barbershop, a Jamaican barbershop, and there was a Jamaican woman in there who had no idea who he was. And Mayweather was really offended and started talking about his money, from what I can remember anyway, so talking about his money and this, that, and the other. She had no idea who he was. Now, when Mike Tyson visited Brixton, everyone and their grandmother knew who he was. Everyone. People flocked. Thousands and thousands of people came out into the streets of Brixton when Mike Tyson was walking about. Mayweather didn't get that kind of reception. We got Mr. Classic Metal. Yep, Goozy. Mike Tyson had career-long hardcore fans. I mean, just to put things in perspective, and I can tell you this for a fact, when Mike Tyson fought Lennox Lewis, I can't speak for the whole of Britain, but in the black community, this might sound weird to a lot of you, but in the black community, Mike Tyson was way more popular than Lennox Lewis. Way more popular. It wasn't even close. The vast majority of people in the black community were rooting for Mike Tyson to beat Lennox Lewis. How about that? Even though Lennox Lewis was born in London, 2 Jamaican parents, but somehow it was a minority of people in the black community in the UK who wanted Lewis to win. That's how popular Mike Tyson was. He was just the guy. Yeah? It might have been the case for the whole country, but I'm not sure. But certainly in the black community, that's how it was. So Mike Tyson just had something about him that people were fascinated by. It's a combination of things. Firstly, there's the David and Goliath thing. The fact that Mike was so much shorter than his opponents. And a lot of people could relate to that as like a metaphor. Not just in the actual literal sense, you know, short guys gaining confidence by watching Mike Tyson beat up big guys, but in life, you know, being the little guy going up against seemingly insurmountable odds, I think that appealed to people a lot about Mike Tyson. Then there was all the whimsical, emotive documentaries, of which there were many that were made about Mike Tyson during his career. The whole story with Cus D'Amato and, you know, coming from a bad upbringing and losing his mom and then eventually losing Cus and winding up with the evil Robin Givens and everyone turning against him and trying to use him, and Don King, and this whole like Greek tragedy of a life, right? Mike Tyson managed to garner an enormous amount of sympathy through those documentaries and the proliferation of that whole narrative about his life, which is only partially true. Okay, yeah, Mike Tyson had a hard upbringing. He was bullied and all that kind of thing. But so was his brother Rodney. And his brother Rodney ended up being a brain surgeon or something, right? Grew up in the exact same house. Mike Tyson became a notorious bully and a mugger right on the streets, and a robber who used to terrorize people for a long, long time. And he was not a nice guy to be around during his teenage years for a lot of people, and even for a lot of his professional career. He's admitted it himself. He literally has described himself during much of his prime years as a megalomaniac. You know, megalomaniacs are not nice to be around. So, yeah, there is an aspect of him being a victim of his environment, but there's also an aspect of the victim becoming the victimizer. Yeah? And that is the part that the Mike Tyson fanboys always want to downplay. But anyway, those documentaries and the narrative they created about Mike Tyson's life is what captured a lot of people's imagination and made them obsessed with him, you know? This idea that Mike Tyson is the perpetual victim. He's the ultimate underdog, victim, who's battling against the forces of evil and, you know, all that kind of thing. And also, as well as everything I've described, as Craig said there, Mike Tyson's style was just so appealing to all. His style was appealing to the purists because although he was a very aggressive pressure fighter and a big puncher, as pressure fighters go, he was actually quite technical. So he had great head movement, footwork. You know, he wasn't just like a crude brawler at all. There was quite a lot of science behind what he was doing. So the purists appreciated him, and the casuals appreciated him too. Because one thing that casuals, I mean, nobody really, but particularly casuals, don't want to see when they tune in to watch a boxing match is a pair of heavyweights feeling each other out for several rounds. They don't want to see that. They want to turn on the television and they want to see two big guys throwing atomic bombs at each other immediately. And that is what Mike Tyson did in every single fight he was ever in. Amateur and pro. First bell goes, he rushes at his opponent and he starts swinging massive shots immediately. So there was a universal appeal about that. Yeah? There was a universal appeal about a guy who delivers every time. As soon as you turn on a Mike Tyson fight, you know, as soon as the opening bell, the first bell goes, it's bombs away. Straight, there's no waiting, there's no feeling out process. Immediately, massive shots are going in. And so people fell in love with that too. But because of all these elements, as I say, the Mike Tyson fanatics, even back in the 90s, were saying things like, if he hadn't left Kevin Rooney, he would have gone 100-0. Like John Fury on the yard, 100-0. And they say that because Kevin Rooney said that. That's how gone these people are psychologically. As if Kevin Rooney is some kind of, you know, arbiter of all truth. Like Kevin Rooney doesn't have an ego. He was very upset that Mike Tyson fired him. Very upset. So of course he's going to come out after Mike Tyson eventually loses to Buster Douglas and say, oh, he would have got 100-0 if he'd stayed with me. Of course he's going to say that. But somehow the Mike Tyson fans took that as gospel. Oh, Kevin Rooney said, if he hadn't fired him, he would have gone 100-0. Take that to the bank as a fact. I mean, it's just... But anyway, yeah, long story short, Mike Tyson was loved, and he didn't necessarily try to be loved. He was just himself. You know? He just acted like himself. This wild, erratic person. And a very exciting fighter. And people loved him for it. With Mayweather, nobody loves the guy. I mean, there are still a tiny few number of people, but really, I'm just going to say it, during the majority of Mayweather's career, even his fans didn't really love him. They loved what they thought he represented. Okay? In America, my perception anyway is that the majority of Mayweather fans were people from the black community. The hardcore Mayweather fans, right? There were fans of his from all communities, but in terms of the hardcore ones, they were mainly black Americans. And they saw him as a symbol of black American excellence and success. So it wasn't really about him as a fighter or him as a personality. It's about what he represented to them. Because now that he's gone from professional boxing, I mean, they're talking about him coming back and fighting Pacquiao or whatever, but who knows what's going on with that. But since he retired, where's all the fanaticism about Mayweather gone? you know what I mean? Mike Tyson effectively retired over 20 years ago. Yeah, he came back and fought Jake Paul. That was actually on his record, but effectively 20 years ago. The Mike Tyson fanatics are still all over the internet. One of the easiest ways to go viral making boxing content is to do those Mike Tyson videos where you use clips of his old fights and stuff like that with some title like "The Day That Mike Tyson Destroyed a Bigger Opponent." You know, those kind of funny titles with a ridiculous thumbnail where they'll put like Bob Sapp in the, I mean, I know Bob Sapp and Mike Tyson did square off, what was it, in K1 or something, but they'll Photoshop Bob Sapp in the ring with Mike Tyson having an actual boxing match and they'll put some title on it. That's one of the easiest ways to go viral making boxing content on YouTube, is just to do Mike Tyson videos. The Mike Tyson fanaticism is still big even now, like 25 years after the guy retired. That's how loved he is. Mayweather, even before he retired, like when he fought Andre Berto, nobody watched that fight. No one cares. You know? No one cares. Exactly, encircled. And then they use AI to scale it to make Tyson 3 foot tall and Bob Sapp like 12 feet tall. The title will be "When Mike Tyson Humiliated a Much Larger Opponent." Shout out to Bexy. King James says, Kevin the GOAT Rooney only trained bums post-Tyson. The highest profile fighter I can remember Kevin Rooney training post-Tyson was Vinny Pazienza. Vinny Pazienza was a decent fighter. So Kevin Rooney trained him for a bit. Other than that, he trained Jean-Marc Mormec for one fight. It was the Klitschko fight. But interestingly, Kevin Rooney actually looks like Costamato now. If any of you guys seen him in recent years, he actually looks like Cus. It's Only a Game says that's what people love when you're being yourself. Yeah, but they don't love everyone when they're being themselves. Some people can just be themselves and people are drawn to it. Even if they're not a particularly nice person, there's just something about them that fascinates people and makes people want to be around them. You know? But Mayweather just don't have that. I guess they call it charisma. Mayweather don't have any charisma. People just not interested in him as a person and they don't care, you know? It's Only a Game says Floyd is scared to be himself, so he has to put on an act. It's sad, really. Is he scared to be himself, though? Or is he just... See, some people just don't have much of a personality. You know? So, with some people, there's really not much in there. And if you ever see Mayweather interviewed, that's the way he comes across. Even when he's not boasting, when he's just trying to be normal and talk normally, there's nothing there. When does he ever say anything interesting? When, you know, it's just... Even when the money-made character is put aside, and he's just being as normal as he can be, there's nothing there. Glom Coyote says, I think it's rare for a fighter or a sportsman of his career to be such an inspiring and values. Or of his caliber to be so empty. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it is. It is rare. Because you think about, other giants in the world of American boxing over the decades, from Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, Sugar Ray Leonard, so on and so forth. Mr. Classic Male says, another boxer who was loved by the public in general was Sugar Ray Leonard. He was making commercials for major brands. They all wanted him. Floyd never had that type of appeal. Well, I remember Floyd Mayweather saying he never wanted to do sponsorships. That might be true. But yeah, he definitely didn't have the appeal that Ray Leonard did. Ray Leonard had the smile. He had the flash. His style in the ring was more appealing than Mayweather's style too. Because Ray Leonard was a combination puncher. He wasn't satisfied just going the distance and beating you on points. He wanted to take you out. So there was that. And there was the, happy-go-lucky Ray Leonard persona. Not like Ray Leonard was the most charismatic guy in the world. He wasn't. He was a little bit of a Muhammad Ali knockoff. but he did it well enough. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Anthony Joshua was loved in British boxing, and he's not a particularly charismatic guy, but again, it's not only the charisma that draws people to certain fighters. With some fighters, it's just the excitement in the ring. They don't have to have a personality. As long as they're delivering in the ring, people will love them, like them, whatever the case may be. But there are a demographic of people out there who actually like these kind of neutral corporate personalities. A larger demographic than you might realize. It might even be the majority who love these kind of very polished, corporate, neutral, BBC-friendly personalities. And plenty of those people became big Anthony Joshua fans. Watching him on the Graham Norton show or whatever the case may be. Well, say what you want about Anthony Joshua, but there's two things that he did that are commendable. One, he tried to become undisputed. And two, win or lose, he's usually in exciting fights. There aren't many Anthony Joshua fights which were snooze fests. There was the Parker fight. Yeah, that was boring. But most Anthony Joshua fights, there's going to be fireworks. Either he's going to get punched up and down the ring, or he's going to punch someone else up and down the ring. And that's what people want to see, particularly with heavyweights. They want to see drama. AJ fights, there's usually drama. King Khan says AJ calling himself a GOAT. I've never heard AJ. Has he ever called himself a GOAT? I've never heard that. Fury called himself the GOAT many times, but I've personally never heard AJ call himself the GOAT. King Khan said he and Usyk are GOATs, yes. Well, you can't have two GOATs in the same weight class, so that doesn't even make sense. So maybe AJ doesn't really understand what GOAT means. GOAT means the greatest of all time. It's an acronym. There can't be two greatest of all times. So maybe AJ just doesn't quite understand the acronym or how it's used. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's another one. The second Ruiz fight wasn't that exciting either. King Khan says, yeah, well, all these boxers were putting multiple fighters in GOAT. No, they weren't. With Fury, he said he is the greatest heavyweight of all time. Himself, not sharing it with Ali or anyone. No, he said he specifically is the greatest heavyweight of all time. He said that several times. Just like Mayweather used to call himself TBE, the best ever. He wasn't trying to share that with anyone. He would go on tangents about why he's greater than Ali, greater than Ray Robinson, greater than Ray Leonard. He wasn't trying to share that GOAT or TBE status with anyone. He was saying he was the man. And that's what Fury was doing too. Oh, okay. The retired old school guys. And there's nothing wrong with calling yourself the GOAT if you're willing to go out there and prove it. Right? Ali called himself the GOAT before he was the GOAT. Ali, after he beat Sonny Liston, was saying, I'm the greatest. But then he proceeded to go on and actually prove it. That's a very good point, Mr. Classic Metal. AJ comes across as a friendly and approachable guy, and obviously that's why you see people coming up to him for a chat and taking pictures. That's true. AJ is known for, when he does do the public appearances, because he's quite a private person, but when he does appear in public, he's known for actually staying behind and talking to people and all this kind of business. Yeah, he's known for that. Maybe I mean, is that out of the goodness of his heart, or is it because he understands the PR benefits of that? Because Eddie Hearn does that too. Eddie Hearn's very approachable. Eddie Hearn is the most approachable boxing promoter, at least major boxing promoter, that I've ever seen. But I don't think Eddie Hearn does that out of the goodness of his heart. I mean, he might get some enjoyment. He comes across as a sociable person by nature, Eddie Hearn. But it's predominantly because Hearn understands the value in making himself accessible to the fans. He understands the way that helps his brand. And Eddie Hearn, I'm just going to be real, has been a trailblazer in that regard. Because prior to Hearn, I'm telling you, these major promoters were inaccessible. You couldn't get anywhere near a major promoter to do an interview unless you had press credentials from a major newspaper or major broadcaster. You couldn't just be some guy with a YouTube channel rocking up trying to interview Frank Warren. Hell no. Nor could you do that with Bob Arum or any of the other promoters pre-Hearn. But Hearn did actually change the game in that regard. Yeah, because he made himself accessible to the public to an extent that no other boxing promoter ever has. At least not in my lifetime. And that then set the standard. That then set the bar. Because when Hearn started doing that, all of a sudden, he was everywhere on social media. People were hearing his side of the story, and they weren't hearing Frank Warren's side of the story, because Warren was only doing interviews with major newspapers and major broadcasters. Whereas Hearn was all over YouTube, all over Twitter. Well, Frank Warren was kind of stuck in the old ways. He didn't see what the future was. You know, he actually used to mock Eddie Hearn for being on Twitter all the time. So Hearn, to his credit, was actually a trailblazer when it comes to a boxing promoter using social media. And I reckon he encouraged AJ to do the same thing, to cultivate a fan-friendly image, you know? Being a very approachable guy who'll stay around and talk to everyone and sign all the autographs and kiss all the babies. Yeah. Well, I don't think AJ is, he certainly doesn't do it to the same extent as Eddie Hearn. And I suspect he doesn't quite enjoy it as much as Hearn does. Not that Hearn completely enjoys it, but I think he enjoys it to some extent. Eddie Hearn loves the sound of his own voice, and he loves flexing. And doing all this boxing media gives him the opportunity to do that. All right? We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, compared to other boxers, Joshua is laid back. Yeah. Matt Borgerson says Joshua is approachable. He complimented my tattoos, and I didn't even approach him when I was in London at a presser with him and Klitschko. You know, one thing I can say about AJ is that he has stayed very close to his old amateur gym. He's done stuff for that gym and whatnot. And people in his amateur gym's in Finchley, he's from Watford, but, you know, people in that gym appreciate that, because there have been plenty of fighters over the years, I can assure you, who basically turned their backs on their old amateur gym and never did anything for it. One of them being Mike Tyson. Going back to Mike Tyson, right? Once he fell out with that crew, and another one actually being David Hay. David Hay used to box out of Fitzroy Lodge. He fell out with the head coach, Mick Carney, and he never did anything for Fitzroy Lodge after that, after he fell out with Mick. Whereas Anthony Joshua has remained very close to those Finchley guys, even the likes of Spencer Oliver, right? Who's always, he and his family have been long associated with the Finchley gym in North London. That's why Spencer Oliver's like his #1 biggest fanboy. AJ's remained close to his boxing roots. And that helps him as far as, you know, public perception and all that kind of thing. I've never met Anthony Joshua, but I do know a couple of people that have met him and spent time with him. One of them is somebody I knew personally. Another one was somebody I just knew online. Chris Andre. Many of you guys will know Chris Andre. Chris Andre met Anthony Joshua back in the days in a gym somewhere. And he said Anthony Joshua was really humble in the fact that he was asking Chris Andre what his opinions were about how he should improve in boxing and all this kind of thing, which is kind of strange, just asking a random in the gym, what do you think I should do? Yeah, that's what Chris Andre said. When he met AJ, AJ was asking his opinions about and really listening to what he was saying, and Chris Andre was explaining all this stuff to him. And I knew another guy, personally, who also knew AJ back in the days, and he said something similar. Said AJ is a very approachable guy. He doesn't come across as egotistical. I mean, look, all fighters have got an ego. But he said AJ doesn't come across as egotistical in a boxing context. Matt Borgerson says, I met Shakur Stevenson in Newark last week, and he gives you the nastiest look. He just hates the boxing community in general. Not a guy I'd approach in any way whatsoever. He's beyond us, apparently. And to be fair, I don't really blame fighters who don't want to talk to the public, because sometimes the public can act as if you owe them you owe them time. Do you know what I mean? Imagine if you're a public figure, you can't go anywhere without someone trying to stop you, asking for a selfie, wanting to talk to you about something. It's like, fame is a poison chalice. So I don't necessarily blame fighters who do that, who just don't want to talk to the public, because it must be annoying after a while. I mean, initially you might like it because it massages your ego and all that kind of thing, but after a while you just want to go places and be normal. And there's people, especially in this social media age, trying to film you when you're out with your family or friends or whatever, or your wife. People want to film you, and yeah. It's Only a Game says, if you hate the public, then you shouldn't be on TV. Get a job behind a desk. I don't agree with that, because boxers are under no obligation to actually talk to the public. Now, obviously, you have to accept that the public are going to try to invade your privacy if you decide to become a public figure, professional boxer. That's obviously something you have to accept. The public and the press will try to invade your privacy. But then you're under no obligation to allow them to invade your privacy. That's all I'm saying. Yeah? They can't complain about the fact that people are trying to invade their privacy, because that's just inevitable. But I've got no issue with them saying, I don't want to talk to the public like that. I use my security to keep them away from me. Yeah, without the public, you make no money, but you make money from the public watching you box. You don't make money from the public approaching you when you're having a dinner with your wife. Do you know what I mean? You don't make money from that, at least not directly. So, there are limits. I always try to put myself in the position of the other person. That's why when I see public figures out and about, I don't invade their space. If I see them with their family or whatever, their friends, going about. I'm not trying to be all up in their face. I don't do that. I feel like it's inconsiderate. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like I own them because I paid for one of their pay-per-views once. Now this person owes me his time. No, he don't owe me his time. It was a simple transaction. I wanted to watch him fight. I paid the pay-per-view. I got access to that content. That's where it ends. It doesn't extend to when I see him out and about with his wife and kids, I can now come barging in demanding a selfie. I mean, Guzi says, become famous, you become public property, in my opinion. I completely disagree with that. Yeah, the public want to know your business, but every individual person surely has the ability, or most people have the ability, to put themselves in the shoes of the other. And that's why I don't harass public figures. Well, one of the reasons. Well, one of the first things is I'm not that fascinated by fighters and all that kind of thing. To want to take selfies with them and, you know, try and strike up a friendship, I don't find them that fascinating. But for two, I respect their space, you know? I'll make videos about them and all that kind of stuff for the purposes of my channel. But when I see him out and about, I leave him to it. Unless it's in a, you know, a boxing event or something, or in a gym, then I might approach him. But if I see him out and about and they clearly don't want to be bothered, let's leave him alone. Glum Coyote says, Anthony Joshua is rigid as an oak, no looseness or ease in his step, sweating profusely from thinking what to say to his coach at the end of the round. Okay. I mean, personally, I've liked a lot of Anthony Joshua fights over the years. From an entertainment perspective, the only Dylan White fight was entertaining. The Klitschko fight was entertaining. Even the short fights, like the Charles Martin fight, was entertaining as long as it lasted. I walked the earth like a god and all that. The first fight with Ruiz was entertaining. That was an up and down heavyweight slugfest. That was an entertaining fight. I guess the Pulev fight was decent. The Ngannou knockout was good, right? From an entertainment perspective. AJ's normally in entertaining fights. The Dubois fight was entertaining. Even though it was one-sided, AJ was getting punched up and down the ring. But that's the thing. AJ fights usually contain drama. They usually contain drama. Someone is going to get knocked out. King Khan says, but is he that good? You don't necessarily have to be that good. Arturo Gatti was never that good. But people loved his fights with Mickey Ward because there's drama there, you know? And with heavyweights, people want to see drama, especially heavyweights, right? People want to see someone get knocked out. And with Anthony Joshua fights, you're normally going to get that. Someone is going to get knocked out. It was kind of like Amir Khan. Was Amir Khan ever that good? All right, got disconnected for a second there, folks. Hopefully I'm back. Let me know if you guys can hear me in the chat. Am I back? Okay, I'm back. Good. Big up Matt, he says, did you ever see Fury on the beach with a fan? Well, Fury's on the beach with fans quite a lot where he lives in Morecambe in the northwest of England. I guess it's a small town, and I guess they're so used to him up there, they don't really see it as a big deal to see him out and about anymore. It's kind of a backwater. So well, yeah, he's moved to the Isle of Man as far as tax purposes, but does he actually live there? Has he sold up his home in Morecambe and no longer? I don't know. Goozy says someone as big as AJ shouldn't be getting KO'd. Really? What do you mean by that? As in, as physically big, or as big as far as fame? Why shouldn't he be getting KO'd? Like, better fighters than him have been KO'd. Mike Tyson got KO'd. Lennox Lewis got KO'd. George Foreman got KO'd. Glum Coyote says, what are the other superior qualities of Wilder besides the right hand? His heart. Wilder's got a big heart. And his emotional intensity when he's at his best. He's a very emotionally intense person. And that kind of is an aspect to the heart as well. He's got a big heart, Deontay Wilder. Wilder's definitely got more of a natural warrior spirit than Anthony Joshua. He definitely has. He's one of those kind of guys that when he's under fire and when he's in trouble, he doesn't freeze up. AJ freezes up. You know, Wilder don't freeze up. He goes out swinging to the bitter end. To the absolute bitter end. Yeah, I agree, King Khan. He gets deer in the headlights, even at the smallest amount of discomfort. Yep. And that's just the way that you are wired naturally, you know? It's very difficult to change that. To change from being someone that's a deer in the headlights type of person to relishing the battle when you're under the cosh like that. Because AJ's been boxing for long enough now. And yet he still is like a deer in the headlights when he gets under pressure. Whereas you look at a guy like Fabio Wardley, who's got very little boxing experience. Look at the way he reacts under pressure. It's just the way you're wired, isn't it? Fabio Wardley is wired in that way naturally. When he's hurt, when he's under the cosh, he's going to come out swinging. You know, some people, personally, I think Partridge will beat AJ if they fight. But some people, not an insignificant number, think AJ's actually going to get the win. One of the reasons that I am picking Partridge is because he is a better big occasion performer. But then you get certain fighters under certain circumstances who aren't really good big occasion fighters, who can be for one night. Now, the best example that I've ever seen in my life was Buster Douglas. Buster Douglas bottled it in quite a few fights. He didn't have the heart for the intensity of the battle, and he capitulated. Buster Douglas was beaten, 4 times or 5 times before he fought Mike Tyson? And he was beaten at a pretty low level. People like David Bay beat him, Mike White, Jesse Ferguson, Tony Tucker beat him in a world title fight. That's one of the fights where Douglas just capitulated. And his dad was very frustrated with him about that, because his dad was a very spirited light heavyweight contender in his day, and a completely different kind of personality to Buster. Buster apparently took his personality from his mum, who was a very gentle person. His dad was a very hardcore, fiery individual. And he was always frustrated with his son for being kind of, big and athletic and all that, but soft on the inside. But when his mum died, Buster Douglas, a couple of weeks before the Mike Tyson fight, it inspired him. And for that one night, he was able to rise to the occasion. Just that one night. He never managed to do it before or after that. Because in the next fight, after he beat Tyson, he was knocked out in 3 rounds by Holyfield. But for that one night, he actually managed to come through the fire, stand up to the ultimate bad man in boxing, throwing hydrogen bombs at him. So sometimes a fighter who isn't known for having that level of heart and those kind of fighting instincts, sometimes they can find it somehow on one special night. I mean, you could even say that about Victor Ortiz. Victor Ortiz, throughout his career, was a habitual quitter. But in that first Andre Berto fight, he found his heart, didn't he? From somewhere, somehow, he found his heart in that first Berto fight. King Khan says, for all that cute, entertaining, herky-jerky style, Fury gets somewhat often, I guess you might say hit somewhat often by big shots, then goes down. His eyes nowadays start rolling in his head easier too when he's hit. Yeah, that's something that Steve Bunce pointed out during the first Usyk fight. And I do think it's true. You know, Steve Bunce kept saying he's showing when he doesn't like a shot in this fight, Tyson. Before, he was able to disguise when a shot would bother him a lot better. But against Usyk, you would see signs, as you say, his eyes flipping in his head and just distress signs from him that he didn't like a shot. That's wear and tear, you know? Wow, Matt Borgerson says, did you see that Bradus Prescott has signed with Zuffa? Damn, is he still fighting? He needs to pack it in. Prescott's better off doing BKB or something. Go fight Gamboa in BKB. That's what Prescott should do. I've never really played any Assassin's Creed game. They've never appealed to me. What? No. Matt Borgerson says, what's crazy is that Amir Khan is going to make an appearance on BKFC at the end of 2026. As a commentator, I hope, not actually fighting. You can't put Khan in a bare knuckle. You can't do that. Oh my days. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Khan. Khan, you know, Khan is like a crash test dummy. He puts himself forward for the most obvious disaster, like when he signed up to fight Canelo. Yeah, Khan is somebody that seems to have no awareness of danger. Yo, he's got no awareness of danger, that guy, at all. Yeah, I've always rated how game Amir Khan is. He's always been a game kid. Very, very game. But the gameness is through lack of self-awareness, you know? Or a lack of the sense of danger. He never seems to sense that there's impending danger right there. Even during the fights, you know? We'll be making all sorts of crazy decisions during the fight. Start slugging when you don't need to slug. Chin in the air against the puncher. It's like, what in the world? I do find it quite weird with Khan, though. He's made loads of money. He's not like a James DeGale. I mean, James DeGale made a bit of money, but he never made Amir Khan money. Khan's made real money. Why would he still be trying to fight? Why would he be going into bare knuckle? You know, like, he got chinned badly so many times in his pro career. Like, why not just go away now and sail off to the sunset? Be a family man. He's involved in putting on boxing events in Africa and stuff like just chill, bro. Chill. King James says Carr just loves it. He's got that dog in him. Yeah, but bro, you got responsibilities now. Do you know what I mean? He's got like a family and he's got stuff going on. When you got responsibilities, you can't be that flipping reckless. NJ says, probably been offered crazy money. I mean, let's face it, we're all going to watch it. King Khan says, don't see any info on him doing this. Well, I hope it's fake news. I hope he ain't going to do it. Because it's surely going to end in disaster. Matt Borgerson says, Paulie does BKB, which is dumb as hell. Yeah, but Paulie always had a chin. And he never made Khan money as well. You know, some of these guys who never made the big money, even though it's kind of unfortunate that they're still putting their health at risk at this age, I can kind of get it, right? But the guys that have made the crazy payday, big purses, and they're flush for cash even now, what are you doing? Yeah, I remember the Khan AJ thing. I mean, it's so weird. Maybe because I'm not as familiar with what goes on with younger people within the Asian. When I say Asian, for my American viewers, in the UK, Asian generally refers to people from the Indian subcontinent, as opposed to people from China, Japan, Korea, etc. They're obviously Asian as well, but there's a very small population of those people, Oriental people, in the UK. There's a much larger population of people from India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and so on. So generally, when British people refer to Asian, they mean someone from the Indian subcontinent, like Amir Khan, right? Just to clarify that. But my understanding of the way that things work in the Asian community is there's such a thing as honor. And the way that Khan was carrying on social media with his wife and accusing AJ of doing this and that to his wife, that's a wild thing for someone from the Asian community to be doing and saying publicly. That's wild. That's really wild. In fact, there was a guy, and I'm not condoning what he said, by the way, but it was a Pakistani guy who used to be a member of my Facebook group. And when that whole thing was going on with Khan and his wife and AJ, this Pakistani guy didn't even seem like he was joking. But he put a comment up in my Facebook group and he said that Khan and his wife both need to be honor killed. I was like, damn, okay. For those of you who don't know what honor killing is, it's this practice which exists within certain communities from the Indian subcontinent in particular, whereby if you do something to dishonor the family, members of your own family will punish you, and they may even go to the extreme of unaliving the person that you've dishonored them with. It might be somebody from a different religion, from a different culture, you've ended up having, fornicating with or whatever, having a relationship with, and then your own family are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, and they might even take the other person out. I'm not sure if that still goes on in the UK anymore, but back in the days, in the 90s and the 80s, you'd hear stories about stuff like that in the Asian community, where they catch the daughter having, a relationship with some guy from a different religion or different whatever. And, it all turned very ugly. Glum Coyote says, I have more confidence in Yoka capsizing a collie these days. One of the weirdest things about Khan was when he got caught with that transformer, or he was messaging a transformer. Did he actually spend the night with a transformer? I don't think so, but he was definitely like texting a transformer or something. You guys remember that? Khan got caught texting a transformer. Yeah, that's another thing I don't understand about a lot of these public figures, the men, is why they hook up with these women who just have red flags all over them. I don't get it. Amir's younger brother, Haroon, was kind of laughed at, from what I saw, even by, some young British Asians were laughing at Haroon, saying he was like the village idiot or something. Haroon went and got himself a Desi wife, right? A pure wife. A wife from Pakistan, from the village or something, right? Brought her over to the UK. That's the sensible thing to do. How is that like something that should be laughed at? It's Amir that done the wrong thing and got the wrong type of woman. You're supposed to get a Desi wife. What are you talking about? So Haroon was actually the smarter of the two. At least when it comes to, dating and marriage and stuff like that. Haroon way smarter than Amir. Matt Borgerson talking wild. Excuse me. Talking about the Thailand Transformers. King James says Haroon's ears are so big he can hear this video about him. And that might be a better word for them, actually, Matt. He says, my father calls them Decepticons. Might be a better word for them. Decepticons. We got Mr. Classic Metal. He says, wasn't there a very suspicious incident with Kell Brook involving a person with a big knife in Spain? A person he met in a shady bar. Yes, there was. And look, it's up to every individual to decide whether they believe the infamous voice note or not. I personally think the infamous voice note is legit. As in, it's the truth about the backstory of Kell Brook getting shanked in Spain. I reckon it is. I reckon that's the truth. So, that's my take on it. I'm not sure if Mr. Classic Metal knows of the voice note, but there's an infamous voice note of somebody who's clearly in the know in Sheffield, just because of the details he gives in that voice note. And he gives backstory to a car crash that Kell Brook was involved in a Range Rover. And also backstory to the incident in Spain, as well as backstory to the run-up to the Errol Spence fight. You can try to search YouTube for the voice note. If you can't find it on YouTube, it is on my Patreon page on the boxing tier. The Boxing Brotherhood. You will find it on there. I uploaded it on there. I think it was last year sometime. The infamous voice note. That voice note is probably what? 4 or 5 minutes long or something like that. And this guy's going through all this stuff about Kell Brook. All kind of salacious claims. It's quite disturbing, actually. But to me, it sounds completely authentic, as in that guy really knows what happened. You know what I mean? And it was somebody that actually sent me that voice note from Sheffield years ago. Many, many, many years ago. And when the person sent me that voice note, he told me not to tell anybody that. Well, first of all, he told me not to upload it on my YouTube channel. And then he told me not to tell anyone that I got the voice note from him, because he was genuinely afraid for his life or his safety. Because he said some of the people named in the voice note are really dangerous individuals in Sheffield, like gangsters. And so he said, if they find out that that came from me, I mean, I could have some serious problems. So please don't tell anyone. Yeah. It was quite funny when Khan was trying to gaslight Brook into coming out the closet. you guys remember that? Khan was trying to say, it's a new day and time. You should just come out and be honest. It's okay. We'll support you. Crazy. Anyway, folks, going to wrap this one up. What time is it in the UK now? Is it like 3 in the morning, nearly? Wrap this one up. Shout out to everybody for joining the conversation. With a special shout out to all those who donated via Super Chat. Let's get your names up here. 1 second. Yeah, the YouTube Studio viewer activity tab often gets frozen. That's why there's always a little delay, or usually a little delay at the end when I read people's names out. So yeah, big up Jack Thompson, Cobzilla, Adam Folks, Matt Borgerson, Glom Coyote, Mr. Classic Metal, Grizz, Andre Rodriguez, George the Last Dragonborn. Much appreciated for the super chats. Big up everyone else for joining the conversation. Until next time, take care, be good. I might do a live stream tomorrow for the Ben Whittaker card. We'll see. If that is the case, I'll catch you then. But until then, take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.